And Brandon, let's move into the last topic of the podcast before we go ahead and make our picks for the week. And we are taking kind of a look at the Alabama Crimson Tide. They win yet again this weekend, and oh man, it feels great. I'm all cozy here at home. I'm all like warm up. I'm not at home. I'm in the studio. But I'm warm because I don't have to do an ALS Ice Bucket Challenge video in the middle of winter because Mississippi State didn't win by 3 and didn't lose by 3 or win the game. They lost by 24. And the thing I want to ask is, so we know Alabama, they're going to play Georgia. It's locked. They're going to play Georgia for the SEC title game. I know they've got Citadel and Auburn next, but we're going to kind of jump ahead. We know they're going to play Georgia. There's a chance they could play Clemson in a national title game. I want to ask you this, Brandon. This will be the last thing we look at before we make our picks. Who has the better challenge or the better chance to knock off Alabama? The Georgia Bulldogs or the Clemson Tigers?
Ricky, Clemson's got a 5-star quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, who's thrown for 19 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. Again, that's in limited action because Kelly Bryant was there before him. They have an outstanding running back in Travis Etienne, over 1,000 yards on the year, 15 touchdowns. And going back to Trevor Lawrence, the guy just has an outstanding arm. This guy is good. Is really good. And we've seen a lot of that so far this season, but there's so much more to see with Trevor Lawrence. He's got an arm. He's got accuracy. The guy can throw, and he's a really good quarterback, and he's certainly Clemson's quarterback of the future, so I expect them to continue to be good. And then you go to the defense. They've got an outstanding defensive line, and I know that a number of those guys are going to be going to the NFL as they'll be in the draft, and what will be there before we know it. Mm-hmm. But in a couple of months coming up, and they have so much knowledge of Alabama. I think that they could give a serious run for actually being able to beat the Tide if they went up against them again. I know people will say, well, Georgia's the team that would be better suited to play Alabama to beat them. Yes, Georgia has seen them many a time. They're coming from the same conference. They see each other a lot. But I still think that over the years, it's Clemson. Clemson's built better. I think Clemson's got a better quarterback. I think they've got a better running back. And I think they have a better overall defense. I just think that everything's better at Clemson. I'm not saying, vastly better, but I am saying better.
Well, the thing that you're saying that I think plays into it is that Clemson just has more people returning than Georgia. The big thing that knocks Georgia, and my first thought was I wanted to say the Georgia Bulldogs because they're in the same conference. You've got Kirby Smart, who's a former assistant of Nick Saban. These two teams played an amazing national championship game a year ago that went to overtime. It was basically the coming out party for Tua Tagovailoa. And I look at it, though, and I go, look at last year's Georgia team and count how many key players are still there. Jake Fromm is still there, but there have been questions this year. Yeah, I know he answered those against Florida and against Kentucky, and many people aren't going to be calling for his head anymore. But, at one point, there were people saying, hey, maybe we should put in the other guy and not Jake Fromm. You also have both running backs from last year, Sony Michel, Nick Chubb. Yeah, they're doing things in the NFL and the AFC right now, so they're not in a Georgia Bulldog uniform. And then you look at the defense, there's guys like Lorenzo Carter, he's in the NFL. You got guys like Roquan Smith, he's here in Chicago playing for Da Bears, where he's not in a Georgia Bulldog jersey. There's a lot of turnover with this Georgia team this year. Are they still good? Yes. Were they still good enough to win their side of the SEC? Yes. But I think that if we see part 2 between Georgia and Alabama, this Alabama team is also very different to where their receiving core is a lot better. Their quarterback is a lot better than last year, where Tua is greater than Jalen Hurts. Where if I look at Clemson, like you said, that defense is one of the tops in all of college football. They returned a lot of guys, a lot of NFL caliber guys on that defense. And to me, the biggest thing is, like you said, Trevor Lawrence is the biggest thing that is just the cherry on top, because Kelly Bryant in a meeting, like you look at Clemson, the first two meetings against Alabama, they were two great games because Clemson had a defense, but also Clemson had Deshaun Watson, who was an NFL caliber quarterback at the college game. Did we know he was going to be great or good in the NFL? No, but he's proving that, hey, I was a really good quarterback because I'm going to be a really good quarterback at the next level. Kelly Bryant was not that. In the only meeting that Clemson has had without Deshaun Watson with Alabama, Kelly Bryant, 124 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, had a QBR of a 7.9 as the Tide rolled to a 24-6 victory. So for me, the thing that puts Clemson in front is what they return, mainly on that defensive side. But the little cherry on the top that could make an Alabama-Clemson game more interesting this year than last year is Trevor Lawrence, is that quarterback, because Trevor is a lot better than what Kelly Bryant was and what he was last year in that Alabama game.
And I also think it could possibly be because Alabama's defense has not seen Trevor Lawrence before. They've seen Kelly Bryant. They saw Deshaun Watson. They have not seen Trevor Lawrence. And that, a lot of times, usually bodes well in favor of the quarterback, of what he might be able to do, because the defense isn't always ready or expecting or anything or anything like that, which is why a lot of times in baseball it's going to bode a lot better for a pitcher.
The thing I'm going to throw at you, though,
guys haven't seen that guy before.
The thing I'm going to throw at you, though, and I don't mean to cut you off, is you could technically say the same thing for the Clemson defense. They haven't seen Tua, because last year it was Jalen Hurts in that game where Alabama beat Clemson in the playoff.
I think you're right. So that almost goes to an even playing field then for both sides. But I think what you're going to get when you're talking Alabama and Georgia. You pretty much know what you're going to get. It's going to be a hard-nosed SEC type of game. With Alabama and Clemson now, especially since things are different in terms of the quarterback, with that being the most, I think, important one, you don't know what you're going to get exactly. You know you're going to get probably pretty good defense, but on both sides, with Tua at quarterback, with Lawrence at quarterback, you're not quite sure what you're going to be able to get. And I think that is what makes it the most intriguing. It's certainly the most intriguing matchup, I think, out of the two. But if I'm going, again, I'm going to continue to say I'm going Clemson, but it's also because the quarterback on Clemson is more intriguing to me than the quarterback on Georgia. Jake Fromm this season, to me, and people may say, Brandon, you're nuts. What do you know? Have you even seen a Georgia football game? Well, actually, I have. And I think Jake Fromm has taken a step back this season, not a step forward. Whereas Trevor Lawrence has come in and he has thrived. And he has been a guy that people were expecting him to be. They were expecting him to be good. They were expecting him to really break out right away and do all these things. And he has really led Clemson to where they are today. And people can say the same thing. And if it wasn't for that loss to LSU, where Georgia fell asleep at the wheel, people would say, well, there's no difference. He's done the same thing. But I just don't feel like that Georgia team is as dominant as they were a season ago. And I think that part of it is because of the quarterback position. And I think that Clemson is still as dominant this year, partly because of their quarterback position, because they got better at their quarterback position, I don't think they're as dominant with Kelly Bryant. I don't, and neither do you. And I also think that they're dominant because their running game is even better. Travis Etienne is even better this season. He stepped up his game. And I think Georgia, while they're a good team. I don't think that they get to the point where Clemson is right now.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Okay.
Could the answer to this question that we're talking about be neither? And the reason why I say that, how dominant Alabama has been all season, especially on offense. Like, they upgraded at quarterback. I know that he played the very end of the national championship, but they upgrade at quarterback. They upgrade receiver-wise. Like, the thing we've even talked about on a past podcast, where this receiving core is not just like, oh, it's Calvin Ridley and then some guys. It's like they're about 3 deep now at the wide receiver position this year, and got guys that can go catch the ball on top of the running backs that they usually have. But the last 2 games, they go into Death Valley, they shut out the Tigers, they host the Bulldogs, they shut out Mississippi State. Hell, they play the Citadel this weekend. There's a good chance that Alabama's defense could be 0 points in the last 3 games given up. Could this answer just be, hey, you know what? Clemson is good, Georgia's good, but the answer is neither, because neither of these teams are going to be able to challenge this Alabama team because of how good the offense has been all year. But it seems like in the last 2, the defense is starting to pick it up for Alabama at the absolute right time of the year.
So are you saying that it's not just these 2 teams, but it's in fact no team?
Yeah, no team. Like, hey, these are the top 2 teams that could challenge them, but hey, it's a great question, but neither of these teams will be able to challenge Alabama. Could that be an answer that people say?
It could be, but I think that, too, is Alabama, they can be challenged by a team that almost mirrors them in what they do. And I do believe that a lot of that is Clemson. With a good quarterback, the running game, number of wide receivers that can get open. I think Alabama's receivers are better. I think that they're actually much better. But also the bigger thing might be even the defense. A defense that can disrupt and get into the backfield and bring down a quarterback on any given play. A secondary that can pick off passes, that can back down balls, that can cause a lot of disruption in that secondary. There's not a lot of teams that you can say even come close to mirroring what Alabama does. But I think in a way Clemson can, and is maybe the closest of any other team that we're looking at. Even the teams that we look at right now in the playoff picture outside of Clemson. Look at Michigan. Nope. Their offense, I don't think, would sustain enough. They have a great running game, but I think that Shea Patterson would have a heck of a time against Alabama's defense. Then you look at Notre Dame. Most people will say, well, we know what happened to Notre Dame when the last time they played Alabama. 2 different teams. 2 completely different teams. Not even talking the same ball game. But still, while Notre Dame's defense is very good, and their offense has been very good, they have not, this is where I think you can definitely say they have not seen a team that's like Alabama. And they haven't. They've seen some good teams, has Notre Dame, but they have not seen a team near Alabama. And then you've got Clemson, and I think Clemson is the closest team to be able to do it. So we're looking at a playoff scenario right now of the teams that are currently in, and the new playoff picture hasn't come out yet, but I highly doubt it changing. Maybe it would, but I don't see that happening. And I just think there is not a team, again, even outside of Clemson, but there's a little bit of a gap between Clemson and Alabama where there's a whole lot of hope for a team to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and that is, I think if you went around the country, that would most likely be the answer, where you'd get a lot of people that would say, oh, well, so-and-so could definitely beat him. I definitely think that. And then you'd go, well, what's your favorite team? And they tell you the team that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I think that you can be hopeful, and there's reason to have hope. Alabama is a team that can lose. The method to them being of losing, it would be if Tua is injured and is struggling and cannot get passes off, kind of like this past weekend, similar to this past weekend. If Mississippi State's defense would have held against the run, we're talking a different story than a 24-0 final score. Because Alabama, what were they able to do really well? They were able to run the ball really well and really effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Tua had struggles. That offensive line struggled against the defensive front of Mississippi State. But that's about the only recipe, is if you're able to, one, get Tua feeling uncomfortable and stop the run game.
Yeah,
but no team is most likely no team's going to be able to do both.
And I mean, my final thought on this is basically, if I had to pick one of these two teams, like we did at the beginning, I would say Clemson for all the reasons that we've brought up. My big one is quarterback and the players that they have returning, whereas Georgia doesn't have those same players returning across the field. But really, my answer might lean towards neither of these teams, that Alabama is just too good and they're going to roll through everyone this year and they will most likely be the national champion. I know people are going to look at that and go, Ricky, that's a boring answer, but I mean, this is a team, this is probably the best Alabama team that we've seen in quite some time, and that's even saying something because these Alabama teams have usually been really, really good, and they've got a guy at quarterback that, like I even said to Dave this weekend, I said, because of Tua and because of how weak this quarterback class is for the draft, I just want to hit the fast forward button and go to next year's draft because I want to see what team is going to draft Tua Tagovailoa and have him on their team because of how good I think he's even going to be at the next level when we start talking about draft. So, I mean, part of me wants to say neither, but like if I had to pick one or the other, I'm going to go with Clemson. Any final thoughts for you, something that you hadn't said you want to say before we go and make our picks to end the podcast?
No, I think I said it all.
Well, this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think. Is it Georgia? Is it Clemson? Or are you sitting on that fence and going, guys, I don't even know why you're asking this question. It's neither. Alabama's going to roll Tide all the way to the national title, and nobody is going to stop them, not even get in their way and slow them down. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section.